Independent living. It's the entry point, probably the easiest entry point on the continuum of care. We're going to learn a little bit about where that falls on the continuum of care, and also we'll get a sort of tour of a great facility up in Mauston that offers independent living. We're going to talk with two very, very good panelists. One is Raymond Weiss, Vice President and Chief Long-Term Care Officer from Bluff Medical Center, and Jill Finley, the Housing Coordinator at Terrace Heights Retirement Community. From Terrace Heights here in Mauston, I'm Justin Riley, and this is Wisconsin Doctors. Welcome back to Wisconsin Doctors. We are here at the Terrace Heights Retirement Community, which is a division of Bluff Medical Center here in Mauston. And we're talking independent living on our program today, and I'm joined by a great team of panelists. This is Raymond Weiss and Jill Finley. How are you guys?
Good. Doing well.
We're in a little bit of a different location from what we normally are, but I think this is a great location. We're actually in the model apartment here at Terrace Heights. You know, we've discussed continuum of care on a number of different programs on Wisconsin Doctors, but I'm wondering if you guys can give us an overview of what exactly is the continuum of care, and also where does independent living fit into the continuum of care?
Sure, Justin. It's really the beginning of that continuum. It's a community of seniors that are more active, healthy, looking for a new living environment, but the important piece is that community. And so they're not alone. Mm-hmm. They're a part of a community here and just a different lifestyle than they were in their previous home.
I think that's so important. The key phrase for me that popped out was they're not alone. And I think that's so often, you know, as people age, I'm thinking about my grandmother in particular. She lives with my mother, but she doesn't really have anybody else that she can sort of talk to who says, hey, I'm going through this, I'm going through that, or whatever. And so I think that you know, being in that community is so important.
It is.
So what exactly is independent living? So let's expand on that element a little bit.
Sure. I mean, it's really a retirement community. So for individuals that, like I said, are very active, healthy, just looking for a little bit less responsibility around the house, but yet, you know, an opportunity to still, you know, live their lifestyle that they want to. Sure. and come and go as they please. And it's really a sense of the next phase in someone's life with a little bit less responsibility, like I said.
Less responsibility around the house. Can I sign up for that? I don't know if my wife would be happy about that or not. But so Jill, you are the housing coordinator here at Terrace Heights. First time on the program, so welcome. Good to have you here. Tell us a little bit about Terrace Heights and how exactly it's affiliated with Bluff Medical Center.
So Terrace Heights is a retirement community for anybody 62 and older.
Okay.
And we provide a secure environment. We provide a lot of activities and meals and transportation, also housekeeping options and things like that. It is owned by Bluff, but and we're conveniently located right next door to Bluff. So.
I've heard one of the common misconceptions about Terrace Heights is that people often call it or think of it as an assisted living facility, but it's not an assisted living facility. What's the difference between independent living and assisted living? Because the residents, or excuse me, the tenants do receive some assistance here. Is that correct?
They can.
Okay.
They certainly can, but a typical...
It's an option, in other words.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's an option. A typical experience is more someone that's still active and healthy. I think the difference is that someone who requires assisted living requires help with their daily activities.
There you sure. Yeah.
And so with independent living, they're more secure, they're more ready to take on those daily activities themselves.
Okay. All right. Good information. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about who might be the right person to be a tenant here at Terrace Heights. We'll be right back with more Wisconsin Doctors here at Terrace Heights, part of Bluff Medical Center, after the break. We're talking independent living today here at Terrace Heights Retirement Community. And I guess my next question would be, who is your typical tenant at Terrace Heights? Who is this a good fit for?
Sure. I think it's someone who's simply looking for the next phase in their life. Typically a couple, but not always.
Oh, really? Okay.
That has maybe recently sold their home, and as Jill mentioned, maybe someone in their early to mid 60s that, or late 60s that just simply is looking for a community of like-minded individuals, seniors that want to commune together.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have the opportunity to film in this model apartment. So this is kind of an example of what the living arrangements may look like for a couple or an individual who might move in here. So Jill, as the housing coordinator here, give us an overview of what some of the amenities are here within these apartments.
So we're in a typical one-bedroom here. It's a typical apartment. It's got a full kitchen. They have accessible bathrooms, so if somebody does have a wheelchair or walker that's capable of doing that. Beautiful deck space or patio on each of the in each of the apartments. We have some 2 bedrooms that just have a little more space. There's storage available as well, and then in the community itself, we have a lot of activities as well.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, when I walk in, I was actually surprised at what this looks like. It's not, just a one-room studio type of thing. I mean, there's a living room, there's a bathroom, there's a bedroom, a kitchen, just like you'd find in a typical apartment. So, you had mentioned earlier that tenants might enjoy different varying degrees of assistance from staff, that it could be something where they're completely independent and they just want to, have a little bit less responsibility at home, or, they might need help from different types of things throughout their day. Can you give us some examples of the different types of assistance that are offered by the staff here at Terrace Heights?
Sure. So they can, depending on the needs of the tenant, they have an option to get some housekeeping in their rooms, and it depends on what they need. They can come weekly, they can come once a month, whatever they need. We can do housekeeping, we can do laundry. We have meal service as well, so that's an option that they can have, as well as transportation.
And when you say meal service, are you talking meals like coming here to the room, or they go?
Nope, in the dining room.
In the dining room. Okay, well, we can kind of cover that later on in the program here today. So, Raymond, when do you think it's time for someone to consider moving into an independent care facility like this? And then also, obviously we're talking continuum of care today, so when might it be a good time to consider moving out?
Sure. As I mentioned before, I think the independent living is really that first phase in the continuum. But there's every season under the sun, and none of us are getting any younger.
Right.
And that happens when people age in place in independent living. And so there comes a point where people recognize they simply need more care, and with their daily activities, and just slowing down a little bit more. And that's when those conversations begin. Is this really the right setting for me or my loved one? And then we look at other options like assisted living or other care settings. Absolutely.
I'm going to throw you a little curveball here because I'm just kind of curious about this. You guys obviously work, in this area, and this is what you do. I'm kind of curious as to know, is it more difficult to have that conversation where somebody may need to move from an independent living facility to an assisted living facility? Is that more difficult than if they're living on their own in their own house that they've lived in for 45 years and then they have to make that transition to an assisted living facility? Is it more difficult, or is it easier if they've started out here?
Go ahead, Jill, please.
Honestly, I think it's easier conversation if they've been here and established. They normally can see the issues that they're having. Sometimes it's harder to give up your own house and the things that you've worked so hard for. But it's nice to be in a community where you have the help you need. So.
And for the sake of your loved ones, it's nice to know that you're not living alone. Your loved ones aren't living alone in that house all by themselves. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen to them. They have people around that can kind of check in and take care of them if need be. So it's awesome. Well, we got to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about my favorite topic, the dining room here. So we'll be right back with more Wisconsin doctors here at Terrace Heights. We're back here at Terrace Heights Retirement Community, and we've been talking about independent living, which is sort of the first step in the continuum of care. And we've talked a little bit about who might qualify or who might be a good candidate for moving into or transitioning into an independent living facility, and then maybe also when it's time to transition out. And we've talked about some of the amenities here, what's available here in the apartment. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics now, food, the food. And so let's talk about the dining room. Obviously, there's a kitchen in each one of these apartments. So if a tenant wishes to cook for themselves, and they have their own things that they want to cook, they have that option. But they also have the option of having meals cooked for them and enjoying them in a more community setting. So, Jill, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the food options that are offered here at Terrace Heights?
Sure. So for our breakfast, we have a continental style breakfast, and a lot of the tenants like to come down and just coffee clutch, even if they just have a cup of coffee and talk to see what's going on for the day. For our lunch meal, we have a plated meal service, which is prepared next door at Bluff, and they have a wonderful kitchen staff that prepares some excellent meals and desserts. So we can do a variety of options if they have certain dietary restrictions. So working with the Bluff Hospital is a good relationship there.
So they make the food and then they kind of deliver it over across the parking lot, so to speak, to Terrace Heights. That's awesome. So the dining room is not just dining goes on there. What are some of the other activities that tenants can enjoy in the dining room?
Sure. So we have various music concerts, educational opportunities, some seminars, the typical games and bingo and things like that. And they also like to get together on their own, though, without the scheduled activities and play Scrabble or what have you.
So it's not off limits. If I want to go in there during off hours,
Anytime.
I'm welcome to do that. Okay, that's great. That's great. So, Raymond, we've talked about when it might be time for an individual to consider transitioning to an independent living facility, and also when it might be time to transition out. Can you think of any examples of people not currently living in an independent living facility who may not be good candidates for a place like Terrace Heights?
Sure. I think primarily is someone that simply requires too much care. And in particular with their daily activities.
Yeah, regardless of their age.
Regardless of their age, because we certainly have individuals that are older than 60 here, and again, an opportunity to age in place. But I think it's also that individual that just might not be ready for a community of living. Has more independence. Themselves and has that type of active lifestyle. But again, sooner or later, individuals make that transition.
Yeah, they're going to have to make the transition where they're relying more on other people, and whether it's kind of a slower, more gradual transition, like moving from independent living to more assisted living,
right?
Or just moving directly to assisted living, they're going to probably have to make that transition eventually.
Exactly.
So I guess my question is, when it comes to people transitioning into assisted living, or independent living, do you find that there's ever tenants who sort of are skeptical about moving into a place like Terrace Heights, or do you really encourage the loved ones, the people that are kind of taking care of the folks who are kind of looking after the folks who might be good candidates for independent living? Do you kind of encourage them to say, well, if they're not ready from a mental or emotional or whatever standpoint, then don't push this on them? I mean, is that something that you encourage people to do?
So,
Jill?
it definitely is a hard decision to make.
Right.
It all depends on what they're ready for, and sometimes the family does have to have a little push and say, you know what, Mom, I just don't feel with you safe being alone. Anything could go wrong for somebody owning their home, whether it be the water heater going out, or there's a bat in the house, or whatever. Those things you don't have to worry about when you're in a community like ours.
Right. So anything that we can do to sort of convince somebody that this might be a good option for them is a good thing. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other offerings here at Terrace Heights. We'll be right back with more Wisconsin Doctors. The first step of the continuum of care is independent living, and that's what we've been discussing here at Terrace Heights Retirement Community, independent living, and we've talked a lot about some of the considerations when someone might want to move into a facility like this, maybe when also it might not be a good fit for them. And also we've talked about some of the amenities, what they can expect to find in an apartment, the food, of course, we talked about that. I want to make sure that we touch on a few other things though here at Terrace Heights. Let's talk about your library, Jill. What can the tenants expect to find at your library?
Sure. So we have a good variety of course, books, nonfiction, everything like that. We've got videos, books on tape. We do have a good selection. We have a good community relationship with our local library in town, and so they bring us a good variety of things every so many weeks.
Sure.
We have a visual reader, so if anybody has visual problems, they can use that as well.
Very nice. So the local library is kind of bringing in new materials, and they are there for a while, and then they'll kind of switch it out every now and then, so people can have access to newer items.
Yes.
That's great. And you also have an exercise room. So talk to us a little bit about, first of all, what kind of equipment is available in the exercise room, but then you also have some activities that go on there, some sort of group activities.
Yeah, so we have an exercise class that's led by one of our athletic trainers at Bluff, and that we have a couple days a week. And all the equipment down there is free for anybody to use in the tenants. So there's the typical bikes and treadmills and that kind of thing, weights and anything that you might need to exercise.
Okay.
So.
And then you have group activities. You have a trainer that comes in as well?
Yes.
Okay. And what sorts of activities are the trainer doing?
So he does a group exercise program, does different stretches and different exercises that are age appropriate for the class that we have.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And one of the things, Raymond, that you had mentioned before we started recording was this the concept of wellness and how that fits into the overall tenant experience here, which I think is a good transition from talking about the exercise room. So can you elaborate on the whole wellness factor in the tenant experience?
Sure. I mean, I think the fact that we do have a facility, exercise room, speaks to that.
Right.
But I think it's more about this sense of maintaining independence. And a simple thing like making sure that your balance is good. But wellness speaks to more than just physical health. It speaks to emotional and spiritual health too. So more of a holistic approach to our wellness program is what someone can expect here at Terrace Heights.
We've got just a little bit of time here. Can you elaborate on what you said, the mental, emotional, and spiritual components? What sorts of things are available for tenants in those areas?
Sure, I think Jill could speak to that probably more, but I think in general, it's really being intentional about understanding what defines wellness for people.
Sure.
And the activities that Jill had mentioned, I think, hit on most of those areas, not just the physical well-being, but the holistic approach to wellness.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it strikes me that you guys have a lot of just community-oriented activities here where people can really come together with, as you said, like-minded people and really kind of make meaningful connections and make new friends too, where maybe they didn't have any before. So, let's talk, we have just a little bit of time left. Why is it so important? We've been talking about independent living this whole time here. Why is it so important for us humans to maintain our independence as long as possible?
I think it's something naturally as part of the human experience that we want to maintain our independence, which is why we speak to that journey that we journey along with these individuals and families, because it's a sense of loss when you lose that independence. And so maintaining that as long as possible really speaks to a high quality of life.
And that really is what it's about. It's about quality of life, not necessarily quantity of years.
Exactly right.
So, and I think you guys do a great job of that. So, anything else you'd like to add before we close out today?
No, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for allowing us into your model apartment, into your model home here. This is great. This is Raymond Weiss and Jill Finley over at Terrace Heights Retirement Community, part of Mile Bluff Medical Center. And we're Wisconsin doctors from all of us here at Mile Bluff Medical Center and Wisconsin's 57 Television. We invite you to live longer, live better. We'll see you next time.